Today was day 21 of the Karen Read trial. I'm going to give you my daily recap. Today was a half day and there is no court on Friday. We have Sergeant Buchanan back on the stand. He's being questioned by Adam Lally still, and we are going over the amount of drinks that Karen Read consumed. He confirms that at CF McCarthy's and the Waterfall Bar, there were 9 drinks consumed by Karen Read. They start talking about some of the ring video footage from One Meadows Ave, which is John O'Keefe's residence, and he says that there was video missing in what was received to him. Specifically, the video of Karen Read showing Carrie Roberts and Jen McCabe the back right taillight of her vehicle. At some point, it's decided that they're going to go back to 34 Fairview to do a search of the lawn for additional pieces of evidence that they're missing. They're specifically looking for John O'Keefe's baseball hat and more pieces of plastic. They end up finding a bunch of pieces of plastic. I think it was about 6 pieces. There's more plastic here. This is a closer picture of a piece of plastic. Here's one more. And then really small, I forgot to get the smaller picture. There's the cocktail straw right there. More plastic. They find this like film plastic, which I don't know what that came from. More pieces of plastic. This is on the side of the lawn that has like that weird telephone box that the Alberts said they'd never touched or they didn't know what it controlled. And then we see John O'Keefe's hat. And here's a closer image of John O'Keefe's hat that was found that day. Mr. Lally kind of asked a very odd line of questioning. He said, "Did you have an occasion to go back to the house to look for additional evidence?" And Buchanan says he encouraged officers from the Mass State Police on their way to and from work to stop by the house and look for additional pieces of plastic or evidence. That's very weird to me. On February 4th, he stops by and there is more pieces of plastic. He says that there were 10 police representatives at the scene. Snow had melted at this point and there was more evidence available. Then we see the box that is storing all the evidence and he's going to begin taking that out. And we see John O'Keefe's Boston Police Department hat that's pulled out. I'm sure this was a very emotional moment because apparently he wore this hat a lot. So for his family to be in the courtroom and see the hat, I would have been emotional. At one point, Buchanan says that he and Trooper Proctor met with Brian Higgins, and they were both provided a printout of a Celebrate extraction from his phone with text message exchanges from Karen Read and John O'Keefe. He then stated that they had both of their phones, the victim and the defendant's phone, so they were going to be comparing the text messages with the phones and what was extracted. We learn that Trooper Buchanan and Trooper Proctor went to the Albert residence on February 3rd, and that's when they interviewed inside the home Nicole Albert. They said that Brian Albert was present for the interview. It's been stated before, but Canton PD actually recused themselves from this, so the Mass State Police and the troopers were responsible for doing all of the in-person interviews. At one point, he is going to interview Karen Read on June 9th. He is able to interview her, and portions of that interview were recorded. We hear a snippet of the recording and it was really difficult for me to hear. I didn't make out the first sentence, but the second sentence was, "We're all in on the same joke, right? My taillight is cracked and John is pulverized." And then at that point he advised the defendant to not speak any further. We also learned that Trooper Proctor and Trooper Buchanan submitted their DNA to a Needham police officer, and it was collected on January 16th, 2024. And then we get into the cross-examination done by Alan Jackson. He starts off by talking about the ring camera footage from John O'Keefe's residence. He states that this evidence, among lots of other evidence, was logged by State Trooper Michael Proctor, and it's a recurring thing throughout the cross-examination. Basically, Alan Jackson is saying, this was not done by you, this was done by Michael Proctor. And it creates a lot of reasonable doubt because where is Michael Proctor? Why is he, the case officer / lead investigator, not being here on the witness stand, and it's actually you? With the search warrant, they actually requested the activity log from Ring, and the activity log shows that there was no deletion from John O'Keefe's Ring cameras, despite some of the rumors that have been going around. He says he wasn't aware of that. He didn't see the activity logs, and he says that they weren't provided. And this is him actually reviewing the log, and he says this is the first time he sees it, but it is clearly stating that nothing was deleted from the ring footage. There's a really awkward moment here where Alan Jackson calls Buchanan Trooper Proctor, and he says, "I am not Trooper Proctor," and Alan Jackson goes, "No, you are not." And it's kind of another like, well, where the hell is he? Where is this Trooper Proctor person? Alan Jackson wants to know when Buchanan learned that it was a Boston police officer. He said he wasn't aware at 6 a.m., but at some point that day he learned that John O'Keefe was a Boston police officer. And he said that the case wasn't randomly assigned to Michael Proctor. He was actually the case officer that was scheduled that day on call, so it would have gone to him regardless. But he says that on January 29th, being the case officer and his supervisor, they did not go to 34 Fairview and search the inside of the home. They actually didn't search the outside of the home either. Buchanan and Trooper Proctor didn't go at all on the 29th. Alan Jackson is asking now about, at 10:40, there was somewhere in a log that Buchanan's initial thought of the incident was that he was hit in the face. So it's kind of interesting because he says at this point he hadn't spoke to anybody except he had interviewed some of the EMTs, and they said that he was maybe struck in the face by a cocktail glass. And this is in the logs because he contacted the medical examiner's office and was trying to find out what was going on and was saying that the incident was suspicious. This was also like a boom moment. He admits that he never secured the inside or the outside of 34 Fairview. He tries to say that the CERT team does it, but the CERT team, when we heard from Kevin O'Hara, he never secured it either. He just was searching for evidence. We get into the questioning about Jen and Matt McCabe's interview at their home. He says that Brian Albert was not present in the home when the McCabes were interviewed, but Jen McCabe, Matt McCabe, and Brian Albert have all testified that they were all together and like moving around different areas of the house. Switching gears, we start to talk about John O'Keefe's clothing, and it was picked up off the floor of the Good Samaritan Hospital. It was soaking wet and put into evidence bags. It had to be taken out of the evidence bags at the Canton PD when they got there, basically with the tow car, because they had to let it air dry on the butcher paper. He's asked who laid them out, he doesn't recall, and who controlled them, and he doesn't recall, but he says that they were in a locked room, but it turns out that like everybody had access to that room. Alan Jackson brings out the 2 evidence bags. So when it was collected, it was all soaking wet, and it was put all together in one bag, this bag. And then after it's laid out, it's put in this bag, this dry bag here that you can see. The dry bag has a different date for when the evidence was collected, and it says it was collected on February 4th, and we basically get to the bottom of it that Alan Jackson says that this clothing laid out until February 4th, 6 days after the incident, and then that's when Trooper Proctor put it in the evidence bag. We find out that they returned to 34 Fairview on February 10th, I think it was, because they got a call from Chief Berkowitz that he found a piece of plastic while he was driving by. And he's asked if he thinks it's weird because he was recused from the case, and he says no, he didn't think it was suspicious. We learned that there were no specific measurements of where things were found in the lawn. There was no log of anything. There was no order or organization to any of it. He states that he wasn't aware that the evidence was not submitted to the crime lab until March 14th. So if you've been following this case, you've definitely seen this video where Karen Reed's car hits John O'Keefe's car at 5:07 a.m. in the driveway of John O'Keefe's house. It's captured on the Ring camera. Alan Jackson wants to play this video zoomed in, but there's an objection and a sidebar. Finally, we get to see it zoomed, and he says yes, he observes that the tire does move, the car moves, the car's made contact. We get to the Sallyport garage video and we learn, yes, this video is mirrored. Even though he testified yesterday that it was an accurate representation, that is not true because it looks like it's the passenger side of the car here on this side, but this is actually the driver's side of the car. I showed the mirrored image yesterday in my day 20 recap, and you can see this is the driver's side of the car. You can now read right here on this car, it says police properly. So we learned this was a new video. He didn't see this until about 2 weeks ago from Mr. Lally. They had a meeting about what he was going to be testifying about. And Alan Jackson wants to know, why did you not ever say that this video was inverted when you were being questioned by Mr. Lally? We're following the person in the hat that is right here. He says that's Michael Proctor, and there is a long window where Michael Proctor is actually positioned behind the vehicle at what is the passenger taillight. He brings up the fact that the video is skipping and it looks like there's a portion of it missing, and he says, I don't know what happened with the video. Then Alan Jackson brings up a USB. I'm assuming it's the mirror video of this video, but Bev doesn't want to see it today. They're gonna see it on Monday. They're done for the day, and there is court next week on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. No court on Tuesday, and it's all full days, so I'll see you then. And I forgot to mention, she tells the jury that they will receive the case for deliberation the last week of June, and they will hopefully have more info next week.